So come on a little journey with me this morning. I want to share a little bit of how this came to be. On a crisp, sunny fall day this past November, I was traveling to Vanderkamp, a wilderness retreat set on 850 remote acres in Barnard's Bay, New York, which is about 45 minutes northeast of Syracuse. I was attending my annual Liberal Religious Educators Association chapter retreat with my regional colleagues. I was settling in for that 3-hour drive. I had my bottle of water, my snap peas, and some strawberry white chocolate with me as well. As I often do, I started thinking. Questions popped into my head about how will I continue to take care of my mom? How do I want to take care of myself in all the midst of these things? What do I need to do to take care of 2 houses? And what do I need to do for work here at this church? I said to myself, hold on. I'm headed to a retreat. Stop all this thinking. I don't need it. So I popped in a favorite mix CD and I started singing along, probably out of key and pretty loudly as well. But who cares? I was alone and I was smiling. It made me so happy. I was enjoying Cool Change by the Little River Band, I Want to Go Too Far by Trisha Yearwood, Dixie Chicken by the Little Feat, Suspicious Minds by Elvis Presley, and finally, Lydia and One of a Kind by Peggy Lynn. My mind went back to work. I know, I was thinking again. But I know that I was responsible for this service today. And I got thinking, March, Women's History Month. Peggy's songs actually inspired me to think about creating a worship service around her songs and the work of women. Wow. So the question started again, of course, as you can imagine. Would Peggy come and share her music with us? What would I say about women's work? How could I possibly make it meaningful? But you know me, how could I make it fun and experiential as well? And so many other questions. So I pulled out the audio memo app on my phone and I recorded some of my questions and some of my ideas so that they wouldn't be lost. Here we are. It's happening. My vision became a reality. It's here. But this is part of my work. But it's also work that I do along with being a daughter, being a sister, an aunt, a caregiver, a friend, an empath, an introvert, a perpetual learner, an educator, a crafter, and a nature lover. All of these roles are part of who I am and how I work within our world. So today, we're going to hear songs and stories about women who used their strengths, their roles, and the world that they lived in to find purpose, meaning, and create a better place for their families and their communities. My hope is they will inspire you to see the many different ways women work and their impact on the world. Shall we hear one of the songs that inspired this service?
Went to Paul Smith's College to earn a degree in forestry. And as you might guess, Paul Smith's College is named for a man named Paul Smith. But what I learned from the librarian there looking at historic photos of the hotel and the college is that Paul's wife Lydia was really a lot of the reason for their success. She was the person who had been educated downstate. She was the business end of things. She did all the investing. She wrote the contracts. It was her idea to start an electric company and her idea to put sawmills along the St. Regis River so that when people came along and bought their land and wanted to build their own camps, they sold them not only the land, but also the lumber. So I thought she deserved more than just a mere mention in the history books. She was born in Franklin Falls in 1834. Her brothers guided tourists up and down the river's shore. Girls back then were not allowed to wander and explore. So she learned to read and write and neatly sweep a floor. Lydia was sent away to study down in Troy. She came back with more schooling than almost any boy, but that did not intimidate a young man named Paul. They courted and they fell in love and married in the fall. Lydia, I want to tell your story, Lydia, so we'll know mountain women can be heroes. Paul Smith built a grand hotel along St. Regis shores. Lydia was raising sons along with other chores. Paul was famous far and near for wit and savoir-faire. His wife was quietly making him into a millionaire. Yes, it was she who hired and fired the staff at the hotel. And when it came to contracts, she gave those lawyers hell. She managed the accounting and the money in the till. She even taught their growing sons until the school was big. Lydia, I want to tell your story, Lydia, so we'll know mountain women can be heroes. She was only 57 when she passed away. No one seemed to know what hastened on her dying day. Some folks say it broke her heart to lose her eldest son. Others say she finally felt her battles had been won. History tells us only half of all that had occurred. We read all of his accomplishments and very few of hers. Some say that there's a woman behind each successful man. I'll bet she's right beside him, teamed together, hand in hand. Lydia, I want to tell your story. Lydia, so you'll know mountain women can be heroes. Mountain women can be heroes.
So women can be heroes. So around the same time that Lydia was working and raising her family in the Adirondacks, a group of women in Portland, Oregon were raising money to build a Unitarian chapel. In 1865, more than 5,000 Portland inhabitants lived on the frontier where saloons and gambling and lawlessness loomed large. But it also boasted more than the usual proportion of Christian people for a frontier town. They attended Portland's 5 Protestant churches and 1 Catholic church. But a dispersed group of Unitarians attended the Orthodox Christian churches since there was no Unitarian church. During this period, Unitarianism was not a creedless denomination. Rather, along with Universalism, it represented the liberal vanguard of Protestant Christianity. Unitarians saw Jesus as a powerful role model, but rejected his divinity. At the time, the Christian orthodoxy really resented Unitarians for calling themselves Christians. It was a battle about what different sects meant by Christian. In Portland, the battle intensified in 1865 when the congregational minister used several Sunday sermons to launch a violent attack upon the Unitarian faith. In the pews were Mary E. Fraser and Sarah J. Burridge. Though the Friends had longed for a Unitarian home of their own, it took this flare-up of anti-Unitarianism to rouse them into action. They were mad. So in December of 1865, Fraser and Burridge and 5 other women founded the Ladies' Sewing Society to raise funds to establish a Unitarian church in Portland. In their first year, their weekly sewing sessions earned them $400. They also organized events, becoming the center of organized life among the liberal Christians in Portland. By late 1867, Portland's Unitarians had bought land and built a chapel largely funded by their sewing proceeds, and they called their first minister. These are some of the amazing women that made that happen. Though focused and organized and aspirational, the Ladies' Sewing Society was not a revolutionary band of early feminists, though. Rather, its members acted in line with the day's expectations of women's role in the family. Following, though, with the gradual expansion of that role into the public sphere. From the beginning, community service took center stage, as the Ladies Sewing Society supported the poor and reached out to Portland's vulnerable groups, keeping their watchful eye on women and children. Their blend of financial support and humanitarianism evolved with the times. In 1902, the group's fundraising saved the first church from financial ruin, while women's suffrage had divided its members. In the 1970s, by the then renamed Women's Alliance, they fought sexism within the church and in society at large. Today, the Ladies Sewing Society lives on as the Alliance. The group's original ideals of fellowship, lifelong learning, spiritual growth, and service are the core principles of who they are today. We can take a key message from this group's history. As the Reverend William Sinkford shared from the first church pulpit, we come from good stock where women's contributions were valued. Women's work is incredibly valuable. When we care about something and we use our talents, amazing things can happen, right? So Peggy has a beautiful song about another woman who cared about something.
I'd like to tell you a short story about a tree. There's a tree growing outside of Warrensburg, New York, and it's known as the grandmother tree. It's been growing there for more than 400 years. And it would take 4 or maybe more of us to reach our arms around the trunk of that tree. When it had been growing for about 100 years, loggers came up through that area of the southern Adirondacks looking for tall, straight pine trees to use as the masts of ships. And they would put the blaze of King George on those trees, and they would be taken for that purpose. But they didn't take this tree because the area around it is kind of swampy, and they were afraid their horses or oxen would get stuck trying to pull it out of the woods. And 100 years after that, a family owned the land where it was growing, and their family named Woodward. And one day, the father of the family made a plan to go out and chop down the tallest tree in the forest. And one of the children of that family had loose lips. Any of you children know what it means to have loose lips? So that child went to his mother and said, "Mother, Father is going to go out and chop down your favorite tree." And because Margaret Woodward was a conservationist, she liked to see nature left as it is as much as possible. She went to her husband and she said, "Oh, Mr. Woodward, please don't chop down that tree. That is my favorite tree in all the forest, and I love to hear the wind whisper through its needles." So because Margaret Woodward was a conservationist who liked to see things in the nature left as much as possible to their own devices, to growing, and because Mr. Woodward was so wise as to always heed his wife's advice, that tree is still growing, and they say it is over 80 feet tall, taller than the ceiling of this sanctuary, and so big around, and it's still growing year after year after year. And so I'm going to sing you a song about the grandmother tree, and I hope you will join me either signing or singing, or if you're feeling really coordinated, both. The chorus goes like this. Grandmother tree, still there growing, though the thunderstorms rage. Gale may be be blowing. Grandmother tree, standing tall in the sun, symbol of life for all generations. Got all that right? It comes around a few times. One day in spring, a seed sailed on the breeze, fell in a puddle and sprouted a pine tree, grew through the summers and many a fall, through each year of seasons, grew mighty and tall, and the grandmother tree is still there growing, though the thunderstorms rage, gale may be blowing. Grandmother tree, standing tall in the sun, symbol of life for all generations. First time the loggers came with their saws, high water kept them from taking her logs. They cut many other tall white pine trees. Still the sturdy grandmother stood spreading her seed, and the grandmother tree still there growing, though the thunderstorms rage, gale may be blowing. Grandmother tree, standing tall in the sun, symbol of life for all generations. Family named Woodward came to own the land. Husband said the great pine wouldn't stand. He would cut it to buy his wife pewter dishes. She foiled his plan, said her only wish was that the grandmother tree still there growing, though the thunderstorms rage, the gale may be blowing. Grandmother tree, standing tall in the sun, symbol of life for all generations. Today she stands still, 300 years growing. Sit at her feet and find new ways of knowing how to root myself strong and reach for the sky, growing deeper, higher, years flooding by, and the grandmother tree is still there growing, though the thunderstorms rage, the gale may be blowing. Grandmother tree, standing tall in the sun, symbol of life for all generations, symbol of life, generations to come.
Thank you. So let us return to the work of women. Through the 19th and into the 20th century, generations of Unitarian and Universalist women worked for peace and justice. Although many in these movements are familiar to us, others are not. But all belonged to a large organic network of activists, free religionists, theological thinkers, and prophetic speakers who influenced one another over time and across eras. You probably can't see it very well, but this fuzzy image behind me on the screen, and hopefully for those of you who are online, pulled up the link, shows the connections between some of these women and their work for women's rights and suffrage, the Sanitation Commission, and peace work. It also outlines some of their family connections. These women who are all here lived from 1808 to 1961. So I need some help though. I need about 20 folks who are willing to come up and take one of these signs. Come on up. You just need to be able to read. Come on up. Take one, take two. If I got 20, that'd be great. Come on up. Because we're going to visually represent all of these different connections. Come on up. And if there aren't enough folks, grab two. Grab two. Perfect. Great. Grab more than one if they're, yeah. Perfect. I got one more. Who's got one more? Great. Awesome. Super. So take a look at the names on those posers so that you got them. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the topic that they worked for and the names of each woman who worked in those efforts. So as I read their name, I would like you to hold that sign above their head so we can see all of the women who did this work together. So the first are 15 different women who worked for women's rights and their right to vote. We start with Frances Dana Barker Gage from 1808 to 1884. Elizabeth Cady Stanton from 1815 to 1902. Lucy Stone from 1818 to 1893. Julia Ward Howe, 1819 to 1910. Mary Livermore from 1820 to 1905. Susan B. Anthony from 1820 to 1906. Louisa May Alcott, 1823 to 1888. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, 1825 to 1911. The Reverend Olympia Brown, from 1835 to 1926. May Wright Sewall. Lucia, she was 1851 to 1931. 1844 to 1920. Anna Garland Spencer, 1851 to 1931. Lucia Ames Mead, from 1856 to 1936. Harriet Stanton Blatch, from 1856 to 1940. Alice Stone Blackwell, from 1857 to 1950. Carrie Clinton Lane Chapman Catt, from 1859 to 1947. And finally, Jane Addams, from 1860 to 1935. These are the women of our faith who fought for the women's right and their right to vote. Place down your papers. Now I want to share the 7 women who worked on the Sanitation Commission, which provided medical and sanitary aid to Union soldiers during the American Civil War. Again, we have Frances Dana Barker Gage, Julia Ward Howe, Mary Livermore, Florence Nightingale, Elizabeth Blackwell, and Emily Blackwell, Louisa May Alcott. These women made sure that our Union soldiers had medical and sanitary aid during the American Civil War. You can take your papers down. Our next group of women, 10 of them, worked to end war and promote peace throughout the world. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, the Reverend Olympia Brown, May Wright Sewall, Anna Garland Spencer, Lucia Ames Mead, Harriet Stanton Blatch, Alice Stone Blackwell, Carrie Clinton Lane Chapman Catt, Jane Addams, and Emily Green Balch. You can take your papers down. One last thing, these people had generational impact on each other. So we'll take a quick look at those family connections. Elizabeth Cady Stanton is the mother of Harriet Stanton Blatch. Lucy Stone was sister-in-law to Elizabeth and Emily Blackwell, and was the mother of Alice Stone Blackwell. Julia Ward Howe maintained a lifelong friendship with Florence Nightingale. And Florence Nightingale worked with both Elizabeth Blackwell to found the Women's Medical College in England. And finally, Jane Addams and Emily Green Balch were both Nobel laureates. Let's give a great round of applause for these fantastic women. Thank you for helping me share that part of the story. These women of our faith were connected. They worked together in community and through the generations to make change for the world that we are currently living in. Blessed be. I encourage you to come up after the service and read a little bit more about each of these amazing women. Their generational work for justice was truly impactful. Can we say that again? Their work was incredibly impactful. So let's hear about a regional woman who also worked to save a place for her future generations.
This is the story of an African-American woman who was born into slavery in the South of the United States during the 1800s. We don't know how she got free of slavery, but she met a Union soldier whose father had been given a plot of 40 acres of land by abolitionist Garrett Smith here in the Adirondacks. And so, after Julia Hazard married Charles Hazard, he and his brother bought two farms outside of Saranac Lake, New York, in the Adirondacks. Two farms that adjoined, and they both married, had families. Julia came here and she never learned to read that we know of. The census said she was illiterate, but her husband and his brother, who had these adjoining farms, died within a year of each other. She and her sister-in-law kept these farms going in the Adirondacks in the 1800s. They kept them going for several years and deeded those farms to their children and grandchildren. They passed on that generational wealth, and it had a very large impact. So I was given this research by Kurt Steger, and also read the book by Amy Godine called The Black Woods. And I wanted to give voice to Julia Hazard because they had quite a remarkable life in Bloomingdale, New York. They had an integrated community. They started what's called Brookside Cemetery, in which black people and white people were buried side by side. And the reason she was able to get a widow's pension, even though her husband had not been successful, he'd been wounded as a Union soldier, the reason she was able to get that pension is that her neighbors testified on her behalf that her husband had been a very hard worker and that his injuries kept him from being so after the war. So I'll tell you the rest of that story in the song. They said Mr. Garrett must be crazy to give 3,000 black folks enough land so we could farm and vote and feed our families, raising crops in Adirondack sand. Your father had his plot near Timbuktu. Alex brought us north to Bloomingdale. Taters, oats, and hay, coyotes stole the lambs that strayed, but we had enough for taxes without fail. Oh, Charles, I sit by your grave here at Brookside. Mary Elizabeth grieves your brother up the hill. We hazard widows own the land we're farming, and God willing, the family always will. I recall our first meeting down in Beaufort, thrilled when a Union soldier asked to dance. Though I was just a laundress for the army, small sparks grew to fire a romance. And when we learned your regiment was leaving, you asked me to marry right away. You promised when the war was over, we'd bring my daughters north and here we'd stay. Oh, now I sit by your grave here at Brookside. Mary Elizabeth grieves your brother up the hill. We hazard widows own the land we're farming, and God willing, family always will. This land beside the river is still fertile. Young Charles is strong enough to take the plow. I won my widow's pension in 1900. That and weaving cloth make ends meet somehow. Though I can't read the deed to our grandchildren, I proudly scrawled my X to make it so. I pray pray they'll carry on here in St. Armand, and that blessings for them will overflow. Oh, Charles, I sit by your grave here at Brookside. I know I'll rest beside you for too long. We made a good life here in the mountains. Hazard family found where it belongs. Our Hazard family sings a freedom song.
Women in our region and our Unitarian Universalist faith have worked to make a better place for their families, for their communities, and for the world. They did it by using their personal strengths and passions, some of them by staying in line with the expectations of their time, and others pushing boundaries through generations. I'll leave us with this thought, and I will modify the words that Reverend William Sinkford shared at First Church in Portland. We come from good stock, where women's contributions not were, but are valued. May it be so.
It is the music of our hearts. It is the labor of our hands. It is the love within our homes, the gathered bounty from the land. It is the passing of tradition into our children's hands. And because of all these gifts, we stand a chance. I know you don't want to wait all the way through a verse to sing that with me, so we're going to sing it together right away. It is the music of our hearts. It is the labor of our hands. It is the love within our homes, the gathered bounty from the land. It is the passing of tradition into our children's hands. And because of all these gifts, we stand a chance. What brings us here today at the threshold of tomorrow, binding us together in our joys and in our sorrows? What brings us to this dignity as we help each other stand? What put this notion in our heads that we could ever stand a chance? It is the music of our hearts. It is the labor of our hands. It is the love within our homes, the gathered bounty from the land. It is the passing of tradition into our children's hands. And because of all these gifts, we stand a chance. Women laid down the foundation for today's communities. They were here in these mountains in the 19th century. Their work defines our heritage, the culture of this land. They knew that only sacrifice could make us stand a chance. It is the music of our hearts. It is the labor of our hands. It is the love within our homes, homes, the gathered bounty from the land. It is the passing of tradition into our children's hands. And because of all these gifts, we stand a chance. There were women guides, hoteliers, and cooks in logging camps, writers, artists, and a few who lit the lighthouse lamps. They started schools and libraries to help children understand that only hand in hand and heart to heart we stand a chance. It is the music of our hearts. It is the labor of our hands. It is the love within our homes, the gathered bounty from the land. It is the passing of tradition into our children's hands. And because of all these gifts, we stand a chance. Chance of knowing who we are and how we all belong. We stand a chance of finding harmony to join in freedom's song. It is the music of our hearts. It is the labor of our hands. It is the love within our homes, the gathered bounty from the land. It is the passing of tradition into our children's hands. And because of all these gifts, we stand a chance. We stand a chance. We stand a chance. We stand a chance.